Before last week, did you worry about your safety just because you're a politician?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, members of Congress and many other elected officials, we've had a lot more direct threats. I think what happened last week wasn't a political event, but of course we worry, and we've had those threats. My wife and I moved about a year and a half ago. We've added additional security at home, really trying to make sure I'm protected from those targeted threats. So that's what made last week, I think, just a little bit different, at least in my own head. It wasn't a targeted attack,
Yeah.
but it was still an attack.
Take me through it.
I came down to get my coffee from the lobby of the apartment building that I live in Washington when I'm there. And there was someone there who was acting erratically in the lobby. Immediately, I got my coffee and got back in the elevator as fast as I could. I didn't realize at first that he had followed me into the elevator. I'd already used my key fob to swipe myself up to the floor of my apartment building when he came in and again started acting erratically. He jumped down on the elevator floor and started doing push-ups. I immediately stopped our progress because I wanted to get him to get out of the elevator. I asked him sternly to get out of the elevator, and he became very agitated at that point. I told him, you don't have the key fob to come up. I'm going to need you to get off the elevator. Essentially at that point, and I won't go by the play-by-play with you, but he stopped me from getting out of the elevator myself, got in my face, stepped in front of the buttons, wouldn't allow us to go up, wouldn't allow me to open, and indicated that I needed to take him to my apartment. I think it was at that moment where I realized this was not going to be something that I could reason with someone on. And that's when I started fighting back. Just tried to get him out of the way of the buttons. He grabbed my neck. He grabbed me from behind at one point, tried to pull me away again from the buttons, kind of from my collarbone this way. I had a cup of hot coffee in my hand because that's why I was in the lobby to begin with. And I reached over and poured the hot coffee on him as he was attempting to pull me back away from the buttons. He hit me in the face. The swelling is down now. You can still see there's a spot there. I cut my lip, lower lip. That's healing too after 5 days. But he wasn't going to let me out of the elevator. And so all the way up to my floor, we scuffled. And you know, at some point the elevator doors opened. He still wasn't going to let me out. He tried to pull me back into the elevator. And at that point I jumped out and started screaming for help. I was not going to let him get me to my apartment. And I knew that I had absolutely no choice but to fight back in that elevator. You know, I now know what his history is. My team over the weekend, there was an arrest on Thursday evening. I am the 13th assault on his record in the Washington, D.C. area. The 13th. Some of those prior assaults involved weapons. And so as I sit here today at home in Minnesota with my family, I'm just really glad that it wasn't worse, that he didn't have a weapon, that I was able to fight enough to get off that elevator, and that I'm here today.
Why would you ever go back to D.C. after that?
I have had such an outpouring of support from this district, from the state, from this nation since this happened last week. Since I've been in Congress, I've been able to give 12 million more Americans health care. Look, I think what happened to me happens to people, especially women, every single day in our country. It just happened to happen to me last Thursday morning, and I also just happened to be a member of Congress. So this individual is homeless. He has mental health and addiction issues. He also is someone who's been violent now 13 times. How could I not go back? Because the intersection of all of these issues, that's what I'm asked to work on every single day in Congress. How could I not go back?
I see and hear you saying both we need to deal with the underlying issues that this particular person had for real.
Yeah.
And I sense you holding empathy for this person.
Well, first and foremost, there can't be a 14th or a 15th or a 20th. I was assaulted violently, punched in the face. He grabbed my neck. He wasn't going to let me out of that elevator if I hadn't fought my way out. So there's that piece of it. He shouldn't be walking the streets of Washington, D.C. right now. He's had previous sentences of 10 days for assault, 30 days for assault. But he also hasn't received the help he needs to even have a chance at rehabilitation. You know, politicians usually have these talking points of it either has to be like this or that, go to jail or get help. It's a lot more complicated than that. And I'm just tired of the politicization of these issues. This is really complicated. Mm-hmm. And both sides, frankly, of the aisle tend to do it from time to time. You know, addiction, it's a really big issue in this country. Mental health, it's a really big issue. And the criminal justice system is broken. If I'm his 13th victim, he just got out of jail 2 weeks ago before he attacked me. All of these things can be true at the same time. And I think that's why I need to go back to Washington to keep doing the work. If we want to keep our communities safe, which of course we do, that's why I've been so supportive of our local law enforcement and helping them do their jobs. But if we want to keep people safe, part of that is addressing the mental health and addiction crisis in our country. Mm-hmm. Homelessness, another key indicator. And, you know, we can't just oversimplify any of this. I'm headed down to the border on Wednesday. I have a subcommittee hearing because I'm on the committee that deals with health care in our nation to talk about the fentanyl crisis. And I'm sure I'm going to hear my colleagues talk about, you know, Biden's border crisis. I don't know how we get there, but we have to sit down and have a conversation that isn't really aimed at who wins or loses the next election in our country. Kids are dying. People are dying in our country of drug overdoses every single day. Families are torn apart by addiction, and I have to go back and see if I can be any part of helping to solve these issues.
How do you heal, Representative Craig? How do you not replay what happened to you Thursday morning in your mind over and over again?
Well, I think it wouldn't be fair to think that I haven't and won't. Like, I'm very aware and have replayed the events many, many times since Thursday. You know, I went into fight or flight mode on Thursday. Now I see the record of this individual, how broken and how violent he's been in the past. And so now I know how lucky I was to not be more injured. You know, my family's been incredibly supportive, but that's actually the hardest part of this, is I want to make them feel better, that I'm okay. And I think it's important that I tell my constituents and people in Minnesota that You know, I'm doing a mental health check-in too this week. That, yes, I was checked out by folks at the Capitol, the physicians, the physical aspects of this, but that I'm also going to make sure that I check in on the psychological and emotional aspects of this, and it would be naive to say that there aren't any, and there won't be more. So, like anything else, I'll work my way through it with the support of my family and some really amazing people that I represent.
You must have been scared.
I don't know if I had time to be scared. When he demanded to go to my apartment, all I knew at that moment was there's no way in hell that's going to happen. So, you know, this is the first time I've been a victim of crime, but what I knew is I needed to get away from this individual, and that if that meant I had to fight my way out of the elevator, that's what I was going to do.
What does it feel like to you as a wife to know that your partner may be extremely worried about you because of your line of work?
It's the hardest thing is, you know, we're family. We make this decision together. I don't decide to run for Congress every 2 years or, you know, endure these TV commercials every couple of years without input from the family. And I think, you know, we all understand that there are risks. We've taken a lot of precautions on the targeted risk side of this. You know, security is now present at every parade that I walk in, every public event that we advise to the press or to the public. So again, we spend a lot of time from a security perspective on those targeted attacks to make sure that we have protection if they happen. The random one, you know, it's a little tougher to protect from. You know, if my family said you can't, you know, we don't want you to do this anymore, I wouldn't do this anymore. But I think, you know, what's so fascinating about this congressional district, you know, it's the only swing one left. When I think about, you know, why am I still here? What am I doing? I mean, I think about the policy things that we've talked about today, but, you know, I also think about that first run for Congress and what I said after. A slightly Republican district from Minnesota just elected the first lesbian mother of 4 ever elected from Minnesota. You know, I'm here to try to help create the kind of nation, the kind of country that, you know, I'm not just the first of anything. I never ran for Congress to be the first of anything. I'm in Congress because, you know, I want to create the kind of country where I'm just the first of many who have this kind of opportunity, who can serve our country. And as much as, you know, in the last 48 hours, the haters have come back out, you know, calling and emailing the office, there's just so much more love. And I feel like we have to keep working to create that kind of country.